So first, I want to start off and tell you about the wonderful removals of the Ho-Chunk people by the U.S. government. So I'd like to give this background just so you're kind of aware of where I'm coming from when I'm doing a lot of this work. And so during the 1800s, the U.S. government removed us over 9 times. So you can see there's like many different places they sent us to. Our original homeland is in Wisconsin, but it also went into Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, and the creator had placed us on the Red Banks, which is up here in Green Bay. And so all these dots that you see here are where all of our communities are now. We don't have a central reservation like many tribes do, but we did come back to our homeland. And so there is a reservation of the same people that stayed in Nebraska. That was the final reservation. But all the it was during my mother's administration where we changed to Ho-Chunk because we were also calling the Nego at that time. And so we are, even though we're the same people, sorry. Even though we're the same people, we're now considered 2 different nations. And so I just want to give you a little background on that. Okay, so this was the first series that I started while I was in grad school at Columbia College. And I was kind of playing against Curtis. This is one of Eckerd Curtis's photographs. And let's go away. So you can see the photos.
If you put the pointer more towards the model was. Yeah.
So this one is if you I'll out there. So
Let's hold it still for a second and go away and wait. Because if I'm away and then it moves there. Yeah. Sorry.
So of course Eckerd Curtis was dealing with this series which is called The Vanishing Race. And so that's one reason why I was doing this work in black and white photography to kind of play against that. And and so what he was trying to do was do anything that was contemporary in his photographs. And so this is a photograph that he actually retouched the negative to get rid of the cloth, which is in this next one. So let's see here. So he would do that with some of his images so that it didn't show anything contemporary. There were times where he even had tars in some of his images, but those of course never made it to his book. And so again, that's where he had taken it out. So for me, I was trying to show everything contemporary, of course. And so that wasn't just about the beads and feathers of Eckerd Curtis's work. And so this is my grandfather. He lived to be 100 years old. He was born in 1904. And so I was very fortunate to be able to have him throughout my life. And so when I first started coming back while in grad school to do this series, I actually started off doing effigy mounds. And so what happened is they were very hard to photograph because you just kind of see this clumps. You know, that's, and now I can probably go with drones, which would be better. And I may go back to that. But what other thing I wanted to do is try to show a sense of community in a lot of these photographs. So I'll have photographs of photographs. And you'll see another series later on, the Ho-Chunk veteran memorials, where they're raising flags and the families are placing photographs of his deceased individuals on those flag poles. So this was called Chokawachi Wokra. And I'm also going to bring in some things where kind of just my process, since a lot of you are students, so you see how it happens. One thing I found really fascinating is I was getting ready for a talk at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and so I found another Curtis photograph, And so it's interesting the way that images are ingrained or in your kind of Rolodex. And so I found this image of Curtis's, and it's almost exactly the same composition. And I was like, I was not even thinking of it while I was doing it, but it just, it happened. The other thing that I was like to do too, whenever I'm photographing children, is get at the same height as them, and to show their presence. And I placed them next to these oak trees because they're sacred to the Ho-Chunk people. And some Ho-Chunks were joking because that little girl has sneakers on, and another Ho-Chunk was like, "Look, because it was raining, and they had their moccasins to get us there." And that girl is actually, she's like 27 now. This is my England. I had taken a photograph of her outside at my grandfather's house, which I don't know why I didn't crop it out. I found a piece of white, piece of photograph I gave her on the side. And then I saw her home, and again, it was representing family. And again, I tried to always show her clan system, which she's from the deer clan. And so don't do it in different ways of showing that affiliation. So that's just like a plastered deer up there. But then she had all those images of her family, so I wanted to show that. And then she was wearing sunglasses because also traditionally, when somebody passes a close relative, and Johnny's like a husband, they're not allowed to look at anything in their eyes. And so they use now a contemporary way of sunglasses, so you're not looking at directly. So here again, she's from the bear clan, but here she's wearing a teddy bear on her sweatshirt. And then on their homes, there's a mural of bears. So it's like you always know each of the clans have their own delineation of what they're supposed to do within the tribe. And for the bears, it's they're like the policemen of the tribe, but they also have power over the earth and control that area. Say my grandfather. And it's like I've got a million images for you guys. I'll try not to talk too much about everything. But this was funny because I was working with cultural resources, and over on the left is a pot and it has brains in it, and that's used to tan the hide. And so he told me to go get it out of the kitchen to boil it on the stove. And he's like, "Well, help me tan this hide." And I was like, "Well, I haven't forgotten it work." And so we get out there and I'm like rubbing it on the other side of the hide on the brains. And then pretty soon all these flies came. And it was like the whole thing's already flies. And when I was out there, I was like, "What are all these things he has?" He's got like the sander, I think he's got that potpourri. And here he took that potpourri and just sprayed it on him. Flies just went away. And so I'm always fascinated about how we always find that new ways to deal with things in a contemporary way. But it's like amazing. It's like, where do you figure it out? Here's an image of we go out picking medicine. There's also another series later on you'll see about Ho-Chunk medicines that I'm working on. It's the newest body of work. But we would always go out, and I would just carry my camera with me all the time. And so I just love the way that light was streaming in while I was doing it. And then I'm also continually working on, and I need to do more of these because they're actually falling down. Because these are called marker trees or trail trees. And so this particular bend is for a spring, which you can see a little bit in the foreground of the stream there. But there are other ones that point to sacred sites. This series, Dear America, they ended up using my title for a show that's opening up next this month, actually, or in March, at the National Gallery of Art. And it's another series I did in grad school. And what I was doing is I was appropriating old postcards and then digitally, manipulating some of them. That America part is all deleted. And these are about 200 feet. And what I want to do is give some of the history that you're not learning in schools a lot of times. This one in particular, the whole thing is to the song America. So my country is the peace, we live in liberty. So each stanza is one of the pieces. So this was my country history. These colors will not run was on the original postcard of the white woman in the back of the flag, and then I digitally placed these on of the two Ho-Chunk women. And I wanted to honor these women because in the old times they used to wear hatchets on their waists, and there was a white man that was trying to rape her, and she ended up killing him with that hatchet. And so that's one reason why I had these colors come out of it. This is another piece that deals with the hanging of the Sioux and the Ho-Chunk, and it's the hanging of 38 Sioux and Ho-Chunk men took place just south of Mankato, Minnesota, near the current Holiday Inn and Minnesota Valley Regional Library. The United States government, under the leadership of Abraham Lincoln, ordered the largest mass execution in North American history the day after Christmas, 1862. So what I was doing is during that time period at the turn of the century with a lot of old postcards, is people would just write on them and kind of add their own what I would call propaganda. And so there's one image that I found, which I had here, which was the image for the whole series. There's a beautiful woman with a baby strapped to her back, and she was in a pose like this, and underneath it read "The White Man's Burden." And so that's why I wanted to, kind of do my own little propaganda, get it out there. And I'm also using a lot of things that they would do. So some of them have glitter on them, and I'm doing the work, or I'm, physically writing on the pieces. So this one is beaded, beading land where my fathers died. And so at the bottom it reads, talking about the removals, and then I changed Winnebago to Ho-Chunk. And then the translation is people with a big voice. These are white people dressing up as Indians. So I have on here Lincoln Pilgrim's Pride, and then down there Pride is their. I have a whole series and another one that was inspired by this work. So I collect a lot of old photo postcards of white people dressing up as Indians. But then I did a series called Encountering Cultures of people doing that, and you'll see that too. So I'm gonna kind of go through some of these, so we can get to that over. Oh, I do want to bring up this one. This is where both my grandfather and mother went to Indian boarding school. And so my mom will talk about that more tomorrow. That's how she's doing. But she went there when she was 8. Third grade. And then she was there up until the 8th grade. And so it says, my mother, along with other Native American children, were taken from their homes and their people and sent to boarding school by the U.S. Government. The government's objective in assimilating Native American children into white culture was to civilize, educate, and convert them to Christianity. My mother has told me stories of her experience about being punished for speaking her original language and the memory of her sister running into the woods to hide near the creek when the social worker came around. And then author of Liberty. Handwritten in between that the United States form of government is based on the Iroquois Confederacy. And so that's all in between the writer, it says author of Liberty. And then this is just poking fun at ourselves, that's the same, because we go with the predecessor to all the casinos that we have now. And so all of those medallions were needed too. Let's talk about Taos being the oldest inhabited place for over 1,000 years. And again, we're joking around here, the freedom's holy life. Native Americans proportionally send more of their people out to war than any other group in America. So the Ho-Chunks also have been in every single war, except for the War of 1812, when they fight on the side of the British. And then Great Garter King, this is Chief Seattle's letter to President Peters. And then at the end, I signed it with my name, Sincerely White. Okay, then these are the black hole forums I was talking about. I was interested in how, because photography has been so fraught and with how we've been represented throughout history. And so I was interested in how the families were actually representing these individuals who had passed. So sometimes they'll be dressed up, in their uniforms and or in their regalia. There'll always be tobacco at the base of that flag. And so that again, a contemporary way of praying to the Great Spirit or to these individuals. Instead of using a pipe now, they're using cigarettes. So anybody can go up there and grab a cigarette and smoke in remembrance of these people. I've been photographing these since 1999, and so I hope to do a book on these soon. So I've done them every year except for 1 year during COVID. This image, actually, I talked about these individuals, and then when I usually always do a photograph to the people I take photographs of, and the family ended up using my photograph at their poll, which I was very honored. And there's about 100 flagpoles that are around the Memorial Day powwow grounds. And I usually show these in grid. I think I have an example of it later on in a show, the slides. It's also interesting that I have so many photographs that I haven't really compiled them all together well, but sometimes there'll be different photographs each year. So I'd like to do a show where it's showing all different images of the same individual. And then there's native commodity, and this is of the Wisconsin Dells. And this was a tourist place where people would come, a lot from Chicago, and H.H. Bennett had photographed the Dells in the late 1800s. And so that was what was drawing all the tourists in there. And they were coming to see the Indians and also the beauty of the Dells. And so I wanted to see what was actually represented of our tribe, because that's who they were going to see. But they're actually like kind of like a real kind of Indian type of thing. They'll have stuff from the Northwest Coast, the Southwest, and so you'll see some of these images in here. I don't have a lot of them here. Black Hawk also came through when the government was chasing him through that area. So there's a lot of Black Hawk references. This is now a strip club, and they've changed the sign completely, but I've re-photographed it. And so I have it in like 3 different iterations. The legend drawings of the Sioux. The end of the trail. And cowboy down. This thing is like 30 feet tall. Okay, this is a series Encountering Cultures, which again, these are just reference photos. So I started off collecting white people dressing up as Indians, and it's just postcards. And then I found out about these cities, which I never knew about before, what they're called rendezvous. And what they're doing is they're reenacting the fur trade era. So early 1800s. And so here's another example of people dressing up. And so what I wanted to do was to find people who were actually representing the Ho-Chunk, and I only photographed the rendezvous in Ho-Chunk territory. I only found one guy, which I'll add at the end of these images. But there are all other tribes, Mohawk, Chippewa. This guy's actually part native, but he also goes to the rendezvous and dresses up. So these are all reenactors. She was not posed this way, but I started off. And my studio, not studio, but I had one of my graduate students working with me as an assistant, and she's like, she's done this. I was looking, I think I had the camera, we had to look down at it, and all of a sudden, I always count. I'll go 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden she went like this. She did that because she said her name was given with Sky Eyes. But she said she was part Cherokee and she was a school teacher. This guy was representing a Potawatomi. And then what I found really fascinating is there were people of native descent that did not feel like they could go back to their own tribes. And so they were reenacting their DNA through actually playing Indian. So this woman was like that. She was a Sioux. And so of course there's a lot of adopting now, especially on the Rosebud Reservation behind Ridge. And I believe her family was from that. So she would go to these to be native. And so I never went in there, being judgmental about it. And actually I had shown this during the Venice Biennale, and there were a lot of native curators that came and they were pissed off about the series. And I was just like, I just want to see how they present themselves to the camera. And then I started finding out all these other things that were happening, where these people were trying to, relive their past or their culture. And it was like, you can really see then what the government has done because they've lost so much. And they're, really do their diligent research to it. This gentleman was actually married to a native woman. This was funny. So that student that was assisting me, she was actually maybe in her 50s or 60s, and she saw him. She's like, "Let's go photograph him." So I call her a cougar, of course. But then we met him, and so he used to be a Civil War reenactor. His grandfather was one of the rendezvous reenactments, and he liked it more. But every year he would wax his whole eye because Native Americans generally don't have that chair. And he's like, "It really hurts." Oh, this woman tricked my mother. Because they're all like in character. And so she's like, "Yes, I went along the Oregon Trail and I lost my husband, so I had to carry him there." And Mom's like, "Really?" And she said she wasn't being a native, but she was homeless. So this is the only guy that I found that actually represented the culture. Okay, and then I go on to identity genocide. This image does not have, I generally have a photograph with it. There's a guy who is, I was talking about how the Ho-Chunk and Winnebago are the same people, but now that we're two different nations, you are no longer full-blood Ho-Chunk or Winnebago because they're now two different nations. So what had happened is he was half Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin and half, let's say, Ho-Chunk from Winnebago, Nebraska. And he, in order to go to another tribe, you have to denounce that other tribe or disenroll. And he probably should not have done that before he did it. So he's actually full-blood native Ho-Chunk, but he disenrolled too soon. And the general council, all the people vote on if you are able to come into the tribe. They denied them. So because he disenrolled, he's now no longer considered illegal at all by the government. And so I went to go try to photograph him twice, and it wasn't happening. So that's one reason why I don't have his name on here. But so that's why I have full-blooded Ho-Chunk unrecognized. These are about this big. I'm sandblasting the words onto the glass so that when the light hits it, you can kind of see it's almost looks like branding the person. And I do that in different series too, but have different conceptual ideas for it. So with each one is this what they've written. This one says the enrollment office of the Ho-Chunk Nation presented a new document that showed the lineage of his great grandmother as 1/8 Sac-and-Box of Missouri and 7/8 Winnebago. He was just 1/4 shy of the required 1/4 blood quantum. His grandfather's enrollment is listed as half. Again, this problem with the Winnebago, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. So his paternal grandfather is also Native American descent, but not enrolled, but he's eligible. And then Powell is an active member of the tribe. He is also known as Cho, which means blue bear, and it is in the Feast Lodge as well as assists from time to time in camps for the Mount Pompano, which is the medicine lodge. One must ask just how far back will we go, and how many other Ho-Chunks are unaware of other tribes or peoples that are ancestry. I think we can all agree that if we reach back far enough, no one is full-blooded. My Choka grandmother, John said, either you're a Ho-Chunk or you're not. And so this was an excerpt from his mother that wrote this. So I have a thing that goes along with each of these. And so, again, this is all kind of U.S. government getting their hands in there, and then also the tribes are doing it themselves. We've always intermarried, and so nobody's full-blooded of anything. And so even my grandfather told me that there was somebody that was related to us that was Potawatomi, and he came from Michigan. And he came to live with a Ho-Chunk, and he said, I missed my mark, which meant like when he was born, he was supposed to go into where the Ho-Chunk were, but he went to where the Potawatomis were. And so the Ho-Chunk adopted him in. So there's many times where the Ho-Chunk will adopt people in from other tribes, but even white people. But it doesn't mean that they're now enrolled. It's just the traditional way that we would adopt people. And the reason why a lot of this is happening is because of the casinos. So we have people who go out on the powwow circuit, they meet other people from other tribes, and they are constantly intermarrying. So you have full-blooded people that may be like 6 different tribes, and they don't have enough blood quantum for any of those tribes in order to be enrolled anywhere. And so that's why I built this series. So this one's not recognized, ineligible. This one says 1/8 Ho-Chunk plus 1/8 Winnebago plus 1/8 Ho-Chunk equals 1/4 Ho-Chunk equals 0% Indian. This is a white gentleman that was adopted by one of our chiefs. This gentleman, Rich, he was adopted into the Bonemaker family, which is my mother's family, my family. Because he was always around, he was a part of our family, so they adopted him in. This was a gentleman that stood up for some children that were being bullied. He was a bus driver. And so a woman, Rose Liner, adopted him in as her son. So I have examples of whites too. Okay, next series. So you guys have a nice series. So you can see I'm like doing completely different work. It just depends on what I want to get across conceptually. And so I'll just change it up. And I'm very, I guess, fortunate because I'm at the university and I don't have to worry about a gallery system where you get into this kind of one thing of making and galleries want you to keep making this. There is one series now towards the end that I'm getting known for is the beaded portraits where I'm beading onto the photographs. And I do keep doing those because those are my years. But I still keep doing other work too. So this one is called I'm in the Universe in an Artist Second. And this I was flipping around from Rich Shoulder. He said he always wanted to be known as an artist. And that the Indian part wasn't that important to him. And so that annoyed me, so I decided to flip it around and do it this way. And so give you some background images here too. This is a rock wall. But what I wanted to show is that all the work you're going to see is an abstract work. And what I was doing was photographing the bottoms of toy Indians. I was actually using scanning, and so I was just scanning the bottoms. And so there was this sense of Indians fighting with one another. So that's one thing that's happening. You're not able to see it. There's the native intelligence that's within the work. You would not know that it's a native artist or that it's native work. But there are stories that go along with some of these that I've been talking about in them. And then also I was annoyed with other native artists who did not want to be known as native artists. And so, but yet they were getting grant money for being a native. And so that was pissing me off. So there's like 10 million different things coming in. And then the other thing, because my painting background was an undergrad, and also the history of photography with pictorialism, the work I consider this work as being post-pictorialist. So you'll see it in no one. But I also wanted, just because you guys are students, to show you other white artists who were influenced by native art. So Mark Rothko was one of them. I really think that this looks like one of the Kachina heads. There was Gottlieb, Barnett Newman, Gottlieb again. So he was mimicking blanket blankets and appropriating and stealing from them, even using the same palette as their blankets. There was Henry Moore, who saw that, which I don't know if I'm saying right, Coachmole, Mexican natives. So you can see he's still using that single form throughout this whole history. And then Jackson Pollock, he saw a sand painter in New York City, and then that's where he got his idea to actually be painting on ground like that, which a lot of people don't know. And so here, so many artists, are using that, target image. And so, of course, I had a riff on Justin Jones and do one of my own, and I call it Fire Pit. So, again, these are toy Indians. This is how I'm doing it, just as a reference. So you see the Indians there that I'm placing them on there and moving them around, and then I'll do a preview and then look at it, move things around again. So that's what you got. So again, it's like on the surface, it's one thing, but underneath it, it's another. So that's that native identity that's in there, because you can see them being past it. And one thing I find interesting that some people call them paintings when you see them, even in person, even though there's photographs. Big knives, that's what we call white people, the Ho-Chunk, because of those big swords they have on their side. So that's how I do it. They came from another village. And so we use that kind of phrase or term when we're talking about another tribe. And so I'm using canoes here. And then they look like crows swimming across the water. This is a story about the Menominee. And the Ho-Chunks had visions and dreams that they would be coming, and so they prepared for them. They had come across Lake Superior. Even though a Menominee would say that they've always been in Wisconsin, they haven't, because we have our stories about them coming. So that's what this references. In the red. So for me, it's one of the, I guess, Native people acting white. And so I have Disney. This has Pocahontas. Mask 1, Blue, White, and Red. Grandmother Earth. This one was a total revolt. White Circle. This was after my mom. It says they faced their homes to the west and put up fences. So these are two, I don't know why the teepees are squat like this, but those are two teepees. There's two Indians shooting at one another, and then those are fences that are around it. But we were at a powwow one time, and some native people had put that caution tape around their campsite. And my mom got pissed off. She's like, ripped the caution tape, and she yelled at them. She's like, only white people put up fences. A different camp. Yellow and blue. Birds flocking. This is another story that my one of my grandfathers told my mother, and he said that throughout life you're going to be on this path, and as you're on that path, you're going to hear these birds swatting at you, trying to divert you off your path. And so he said, just keep going. He said, just ignore them. And so for us, the blue and the green are Ho-Chunk medicine lodge colors that we use about the road. And then a new landscape. Okay, and then we're moving on to the North American landscape. Here again, I'm kind of ripping on Eckerd Curtis's title of the American, the North American landscape, of his volumes of work that he did. It's not really, it's just in the title. And then what I started doing was trying to figure out each tribes and kind of what their landscapes look like. And so I couldn't find a lot, even looking at tribal websites, like images of theirs. So I started looking at Eckerd Curtis's old photographs so that I could then reference those landscapes. It's kind of harder to see. So these trees had all come with those plastic Indians. And so there was this piece that I did for a museum show where I was taking one of their pieces out of the collection and then I copied it. And then I ended up using the trees because I knew the tree was in there. And I really liked the way it looked. And so that's how the series came about. Was there's this in the studio. But again, these are just reference photos for you to see how I kind of work and then start doing research. And I usually show these at a grid 20 by 24. But I've shown them all the way up to 60 by about 75. Each through. This what I had on my grandfather is whenever we drive out in the country, he lived up north in Black River Falls, and they would do clear cutting for wood. And so he'd go by, he's like, oh, area beautification. So that's why I used to chop down trees for a joint. Okay, there's Mama. Strong and relenting spirits. So what I did is I started beating these mats, and I have them later. But my mom was the first one that I did, and what I was doing was I was going to do the mats and then put a portrait inside of it. And I completely spaced out that I had done an on pieces before when I did the Dear America work, which was 20 years before. And then I was thinking, why don't I just do it on it? And so that's the thing you have to also understand is like some of these series have been sitting like in the wings for 10, 15 years. So this one was that way. There's another series you'll see later that's Lumen Prints. I started this in 2016. And this past year was the first year that I actually showed them and did something beautiful. And so I'm constantly working on things simultaneously. But again, just to show you references, so I'm looking at old photographs to get ideas on patterns. And so these were done on clothing. There's a shirt and dress here. And then also I'm using the old twill bags, designs on those. And then I'll, start making up some of my own designs. But this was the mats that I started. So I was going to cut out the center part and then put a portrait inside of it. So I ended up talking about 5 or 6 of these, and then I never did anything with them because I moved on to being directly onto the photograph. So again, just process. So you can see I used this bag for the design behind him. And I don't know, but you can kind of see the when I'm doing these portraits, I'm actually doing the majority of them at the memorial or Labor Day powwow. So I'll set up just a pop-up tent, canopy, and then have a portable studio with strobes in there. And that's where I'm taking these portraits at. So it's the beginning of me working on it, and then that's the finish. These are about 40 by 50 inches. The longest one was 40 by 65 inches. So again, the process, what I'm doing is in Photoshop, I'm making the design directly onto the photograph and then printing that out. And then I'm going to use it as a template and just beat over it. I do an addition of 5 of these, and then some of them take up to 130 hours to do. But the other reason why I'm doing additions is because institutions, there's a great quote from Dorothea Lange. She was trying to buy a piece of her ex-husband's back for her children, Maynard Dixon's, and they never showed the work, and they wouldn't sell it back to her. And she said all museum institutions are lawyers for art. And so that's actually what happens, and especially for photography, they don't mind out for a long period of time because it'll fade. So even the work that came down when I had the show at MFA, the Year of Erica series, that was owned by Mia, and they wouldn't let it travel to the next place. So what I'm doing is I'm now telling the institutions what other institutions have it, so that if somebody wants to borrow the work, they can go find it somewhere else too. But so you can see how I changed my design. Sometimes I look at what's in there, regalia, I'll add it, and I have those kind of marks on the side, and I just have to get rid of it and edit it, which is bad. These are designs for blankets that are around him. And this is how I actually made my designs. The majority of them are from casinos. That's another series that you'll see. Says I go to so many casinos, they then send me all their stuff, and then I use those to make my patterns. So I just fold it in half, and then I cut those out to make my designs. Again, some process for using. It's my little nephew. Oh, the one of my mother is the only one where I was using other people's designs. So in Ho-Chunk Way is generally the oldest person of that clan buries, let's say, so this the chief's clan, the oldest woman there had passed away, and they asked my mother to bury her. And so what happens is you then get all of their possessions. And so she had ended up getting all of her designs and patterns. And so I used those images around my mother. It's the whole time that I guess somebody else's. I mean, a lot of our images or designs are very close, and I get inspiration from others, but a lot of them I'm just doing it now. And this is actually the first time where a lot of times I always want people looking directly at the camera, but in this series I kind of have them, moving in all different ways and looking. This is I believe it was a flag from the Civil War that he was raising for his relative. And this one is actually smaller than all those others, but it takes the longest because it's so compact and so much in there. This is about 40 by 60. And then this is the first time I used black beads in the back. I don't know if you want to see them. But it's great when you walk past these because I'm using cut beads, rhinestones, and literally they just sparkle. Oh, I forgot to say that all inspiration was for So what had happened is when I was about 8 years old, my mother went out to see a Sioux medicine man and in Rosebud. And we were in a room, it wasn't that big, a building, and it was nighttime and they shut all the lights off and they started singing. And the women started singing, asking spirits to come in. And so at 8 years old, I was like freaking out. It was all of a sudden, all of these orbs of light just started floating around the spirits. So my mind was at 8-year-old, I'm getting a flashlight and something. They had a flashlight, that was their arm, that was their arm, and so they were, actual spirits. And so that's what all of this really represents, and that's why it's called strong number militant spirits. It's our ancestors protecting these people and watching over them. And there's a couple examples of where we actually see those orbs. What I got. This one I had at the National Gallery of Art, got second place. And then just recently in Madison, they stuck it on their Madison Market, which is a place where you can go back. And that's first thing. And it's like as I'm doing this, it's like I find I'm doing new and different things. So this is the first time I use the orbs. And then I'm buying things also that's making it faster, where I don't have to actually do a lot of reading. So these are already made kind of rolls, so roaches. And then during Art Expo in Chicago, they placed this on billboards throughout the city. A lot of them guys. This is another one I'm showing those orbs. This one I did in honor of missing murdered Indigenous women because she wanted to dress in red. I think that's what that band represents too. So this is the first time I actually used color, and I did a beaded paint on her face. So and I showed the samples from them. And then there's remnants. So I was with my partner, and he was still at the casino. I had no more money. And so I was sitting there and I was looking at the carpet, and it just reminded me again on minimalism and abstraction. And so as I started photographing, of course, during that time, they don't want you to have cameras in casinos. So I was using my iPhone. So all the series is iPhone photographs. So I was photographing these for like 10 years and did nothing. Didn't know what I was doing, why I was doing it, how I was going to use it. I ended up going to over 100 casinos throughout the United States and photographing equipment. The one thing I was interested in is seeing if they had anything representing their own tribes, design-wise. So then it turned into this. And so what it's now, the concept behind it is about native sovereignty. And then the fact that this carpet is actually native land that the government, accepts. And there's a reason why we have casinos. So it's kind of like a smack in the face back to the government saying, look what happened and how we got through these loopholes in order to have these casinos and now have these strong kind of thriving nations. And so what I did is I went back and looked for old ways that were represented in either old etchings, newspaper clippings, things like that. And so Joiner Dies, one of those. This again is where etching glass, and then it is becoming a positive when the light is on it onto the backdrop. So I have like pictures on it. And then I'm also interested in appropriation, taking things back. So like the earlier images in the Dear America, and thinking about visual sovereignty. You know, so it's like these are actually images of us, and we should not have a copyright over them and own them. And so that's why I feel freely about stealing from other artists. So I did that with George Kaplan and this one. So the original etching, and then the PDF I made for the laser etching. And then this the final piece. These aren't that big because they're the iPhone photographs, so the side ones are about that big. I think that one's about 11 by 14. So you can't see it, they're like swinging a baby against a building or a rock or something and killing it. They've got all those people hanging over a fire. A new warfare. A returning scout. He touched them good. So a lot of times in native warfare back in the day, even if you just touch somebody, was even more powerful than if you killed them. So that's why that was titled that way. Buffalo. National intelligence. The nuggets has well, all the ones back there are scalps. So it says scalp on here, and then this says national intelligence. So again, representing U.S. government. Returning from Washington. GTO. Smallpox. Target makes a comeback. Destruction of Indian fort. Here's one another Kaplan I used. Okay, this one is studies in cultural appropriation, and I just want to give you some background in how fashion photographers are stealing native images. So on the left is a native, garb, and then this almost a clear knockoff by a fashion designer. But then also Jamie Akuma, who's actually native. She's not of the tribes that actually use that okay, but then she's using it in hers. And so I'm kind of like, how's that different? Even though they're native, I also think that Jeffrey Gibson is doing the same type of thing in his work. He's constantly taking from other tribes, but I don't feel like we should be doing that personally. But then a doll company ended up stealing her images too. And the ones on the left are her beaded boots, and the ones on the right are little doll ones that they just copied hers. So here's an example. So this is all about, just fashion. And so I'm constantly going to antique stores, and I found this thing. It's about this big, this man, and it was a cutout. And I brought it home, and I didn't know what it was. And here, when I took it out back, I stuck all the jeans, and I was like, oh, it's for a tailor, to figure out what the suit would look like. And so then I decided to start placing them on native objects so that I am then appropriating these designs to the other native tribes. This is the only time that I ever talk about other tribes, is kind of when it's more conceptual. And unfortunately, I didn't put any more in this stuff, but that's what I looks like. Then there's work I did in Wisconsin Dells. That other work you saw earlier, I was then commissioned by the Museum of Wisconsin Art to go photograph there for a year. And I ended up staying there for about 5 years. And none of this is on my website. I haven't dealt with it yet. I'm really bad at doing the website. I haven't done it for like 2 or 3 years. So there's no work on there. I'll still at least very soon. Again, it's just showing all the kitsch Wisconsin Dells. These are all the postcards. This is one of our casinos where we're recreating Stand Rock, which is where our tribe would dance for the tourists. And then this was like that cave. So this is the newest work, Ho-Chunk Plant Studies. So this is what I was telling you, Rose. So I'll go out and these are all about Ho-Chunk medicines. I don't want to share, what the medicines are for or what they're used for, but just show you some examples of what I do when I go out and get it. And so then what I did is these are called lumen prints, and it's where you take do a contact print photogram of the plant in UV, the sun, and depending on the type of paper you use is how you get these different colors. And what I am doing is I'll scan it first because it's a little bit duller than the way these look. So in Photoshop, I'll just bump them up a little just to pop the color. So I do them both as digital ones and then also just actual prints. So these are all digital. So what happens depending on how much humidity the plant has, that's how it affects the the glow. And so I'm really interested in that. It still feels like there's life in this, the way that they're printed. This form silk. I just want to show you an example of 3 different ways or 3 different types of paper and how they turn out differently for each one. And again, this is this process. I did this in Photoshop. Like this is what I think I want to do with them. And so, like I said, it's this past year was the first time I actually started making. So I'm now get to use color beads, and so I'm beading the pieces and putting them on painted wood panels, and then I have the photogram lumen prints around them. And I'll just do these as I'm watching TV because they're small enough. I can't be like late at night with the larger pieces because I'm actually beading through. I have the photographs mounted to a 2x mat board, and I'm beading through the mat board. So I have to have a really clear mind when doing that. But with these, you're poking your fabric, it's not going to hurt it. So that's why I'm doing this thing right now. And then again, I was telling you I work in different series and have them in the background. And so whenever I'm driving around with my mother, she'll tell me about these different sites. And so what I want to do is I'll show these, but I won't tell anything about them, what they represent. But I'm trying to create an archive for the tribe for future generations so that they know where they are. This was a place where women would go to have their babies and cleanse themselves. This is a cave that we're supposed to go to when the end of the world comes. This was told to me by my grandmother. This was a sacred site, of course, and it needs to be seen up on top of it. And then this is Pipestone. I'm not going to get to that meeting. I have all my books and all of the shows that I've heard, but since we started so late, I'm going to get it. So I'll let you guys go, and but you can ask any questions you want. I know this next year.
questions, anybody?
Yeah. Discussing on the bead concept, isn't it true that the beads came with the opening of the west and then a lot of beads made abroad, the United States too, and then they became appropriated by the native peoples who were selling things to travel. Is that a correct history?
Well, the beads, big part was through that fur trade era. A lot of beads were coming there, but we've always had beads. So they were making them out of shells before, but the glass beads came, from Murano, from Italy, and they were doing trading during that time. That's also where the applique came in. So it was during the French Revolution that they were fighting against the rich and the bourgeois, and they wanted to get rid of all the silk. And so they then were trading those with the Americans, and so that's how that came to happen too. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the plant medicine? What, it seems like a bit of a shift in your work, it seems a little different. What inspired you to move that direction?
Well, I guess again, it's like I'm always thinking about the future and future generations. And so I wanted to document them, even though you can't quite tell. That's why it's like kind of that thing again where it's like you don't know exactly what it is, but unless you're a plant person, you say, oh, that's that. It was mainly, it's like my grandfather has been showing me medicines, my whole life, and my mother. And so I just wanted to kind of find a way to document them. And there's times when I'm actually photographing, but it's purely a document. Again, for future generations, it's not like, well, I made a pretty picture of that rock on the ground. It's just, it's there to. And actually, one of my leaders told me that. I mean, at first I thought he was getting after me because they don't want you photographing during the ceremonies. And so at our Macomb, he had said, are you photographing? And I said, well, yeah, like when we're doing things, or just, like working. And he more or less said, I want you to document everything so that we have it. And so it's interesting how photo has come into the culture too. And there was another time I was at a Beast Lodge and they had, we have our old board bundles. I mean, when they open those things up, it's like there might be a flute in it or something. But the wood is so old, it's like almost black. But here in one home, they had a photograph of a veteran in there. And so there are contemporary things coming in. And it's same with the Medicine Lodge. They now are starting to put photographs up on the wall of the person whose place they're taking. And then also on the last, I don't know if I showed you those. I've been also photographing those forever. When the new member comes in on Sunday, they get their portrait taken outside the lodge along with all their family. And so it's interesting. And it's the same with the flagpoles. It's like, how are these photography is now becoming something sacred, within our tribe. Yes. You guys held up well.
I just would say how all I am with your creativity and endless joy in your work.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's because of being a professor and I'm able to just do what I want. Yeah, and that's it. It's been wonderful. But yeah, it's like I said, because when I went to Venice early on, there were people there that said, "Oh, I know these people," and what they would do is they would buy a whole collection of an artist's work and then hold on to it and then send it off to the auction houses in order to make money out of it. And so, even though I know I am a commodity, I don't like that aspect of the work. But it's paying for my house. Actually, so I just bought a church, old Presbyterian church, and I'm redoing that. And so that's all the stuff to pay for that right now. But I really hate that aspect of it, of like I am an investment, so like there was one woman who wanted to buy some work recently. And my gallery said, well, if she buys two of them, will you give her 20% off? And I said, yeah, that would be fine. And so then she went back, she's like, oh, I just want one. And then she also wanted the first one in the edition because it's cheaper. Because as each one sells, I raise $4,000 every time I sell a new one. And so, yeah, I am creating that market too by doing that. But so she wanted the cheapest and she wanted 20% off. And I said, no, I want to sell her. So I still have that like kind of integrity of where it's like, I don't give a shit. And it's like, I always felt like I've been poor my whole life, even as a professor, because it's like making work, it costs money. And I was literally spending 10 to 20,000 a year on just framing. And and when I came out my student, oh, paying that off, I was like, why am I still poor? It's like just now in the past maybe 5 years where I'm like, oh, I've got some money now that now I'm trying to retire. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much.